So, you're a mead-drinking, hell-raising, bare-chested son of a bitch in need of a few pointers. Well, I'm here to help. Welcome to the second of 4 planned guides on each of the factions in For Honor. Keep in mind, I am no top-tier player, and this is a guide with newer or more inexperienced players in mind, or those that are just starting to learn these characters. We will be looking at the important moves and combos for each hero, as well as how to defend against them. Now before we begin, rather than shout out throughout the video, I'm gonna highlight more resources for you right now. All of today's punishes came from Blue Moon, and if you want a more in-depth look at the Viking heroes, you can find a guide on Raider by Flux Deluxe, a Warlord guide by Red Dawn, a Berserker mix-up and combo guide by M. Goldie, Eternal Cookies reworked Valkyrie guide, Highlander guides by learnin and Blue Moon, as well as Shaman guides by Spliced and J. Burrs, all down in the description below. Now, grab your axe, grow your beard, get ready for Valhalla, and let's get into our crash course on each of the Vikings of For Honor. The legendary Raider is one of the 3 starter heroes and is very damage oriented. Raiders' light attacks are average speed and heavies are ridiculously slow. However, they all still hit like cement trucks.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Raider also has one of the few unblockable attacks that can come from neutral, their zone attack. Also slow and dealing plenty of damage, it comes out from your right guard and obviously hits the opponent's left. It is a move that can try to force a reaction of either a dodge or a parry. However, thankfully, you aren't 100% committed to Raider's super slow attacks, and can feint or soft feint any of the heavies, including the zone attack, into Raider's stunning tap. The stunning tap, on top of doing literally what it's called, is Raider's core mix-up move. It hits the top guard and will daze the opponent, hiding your guard for the next little while. It is done by pressing the light attack button at the startup of any heavy or zone attack, like I just mentioned, or by dodging in any direction and pressing light. You can follow up the stunning tap with any attack. Now, Raiders are known for being legendary, yes, but they are also known for being legendary. They can charge opponents and carry them for a distance before throwing them to the floor, off a ledge, or into a wall. This also somehow tires out the opponent more than the Raider. You can achieve this by either sprinting and hitting guard break, or guard break and forward throwing. Basically though, if there's a ledge behind your opponent, even if it seems too far away, you can likely introduce them to it. However, that's not the only unique thing about Raider's guard break, it doesn't stop there. If you do a back throw, you'll actually kinda spin around up to 360 degrees and dance with your opponent. Obviously, the longer you hold it, the more you spin. You can let it go at any time, however, keep in mind it's only a 360 degree rotation. On top of that, a huge strength I feel some people overlook or just outright forget is an ability unique only to Raider. Raider can not only dodge to the side and guard break, but this also extends to counter guard breaks as well. Any mix-up that leads you to dodging is now almost negated. For example, if a Lawbringer shoves you and you dodge and they guard break, you can safely counter it unless you're out of stamina. However, the ability to guard break and counter guard break isn't active immediately at the beginning of the dodge, so a guard break on the startup of your dodge is still confirmed. Now, as for starting fights, Raider can go for that charge, but if I'm honest, it's relatively easy to dodge and does open you up to a free guard break. You could try mixing it up with a guard break, or you can do their sprinting heavy. But what I find works is if the opponent makes the first attack, dodge it into a stunning tap and begin your combos. We move on now to Raider's punishes. Off of a heavy parry, Raider does get a light from any direction, and off a light parry, Raider can get a side heavy. Off a guard break, you can light attack or a zone attack for more damage. We'll also talk about throw punishes because of the different throws Raider has. If there isn't a wall and you forward charge them, you can carry them to drain stamina and you will get a zone attack. Or if it's not confirmed, it's at least very, very difficult to parry on wake up. If you carry your opponent into a wall, you'll actually knee them to the face, which does damage, and you can follow that up with a light attack. However, you can also go for a zone attack for even more damage. It's incredibly difficult to parry, but it can be done. The bots weren't able to do it, but I've seen players do it. Now, if you do the back throw and spin them into the wall, any side heavy that doesn't match their guard seems to be confirmed, and top heavy seem to be confirmed if you're a little bit further away from the wall, allowing for time before they splat. You can also try this off the side throws, however I found it was a lot easier to get this off the back throw because you recover from the throw a lot quicker. Now what about when the opponent is out of stamina? Well, off of a spinning throw, the max punish is stunning tap into zone, but keep in mind you're vulnerable to a guard break on stand up if you're actually in revenge like I am, and they're not actually out of stamina. However, if you're close to a wall, a spinning throw will net you a heavy into zone attack, but again, you are vulnerable to guard break upon stand up. Off of an out of stamina parry, you can go light attack into zone, but again, you're vulnerable to a guard break. The safest option, honestly, is going top heavy into your zone attack mix-up. Now I find Raider to be decently strong in groups with wide sweeping attacks that can hit multiple opponents, as well as the charge that can either single out, open up, or completely remove opponents from the equation by just ledging them. Also, there are times that the zone attacks animation is beyond screwed up if you throw it and then switch targets. The zone will sometimes look like it is still aiming for your first opponent, but if you switch, it'll actually flip, allowing you to do a 360 and hitting the other opponent, catching them completely by surprise. Fire Flask is also a great crowd control feat, as it burns everybody, sadly including allies, making it a good tool in choke points or in Dominion zones to force the enemies out of the zone. Just keep in mind though that slower attacks are going to make you easier to parry when you're getting ganked, so I would rely on feinting and baiting parries to build up your revenge. Now, being legendary does not make you unkillable. Raider is a very limited hero with really only one mix-up, and that being the stunning tap. Everything thrown is reactable, and the stunning tap makes you vulnerable for a light parry. The sad thing is that the stunning tap and guard break are Raider's only real openers. Remember that Raider's charge drains stamina, which means that you may constantly find yourself out of stamina if you get guard broken a lot. If it does happen to come to that, don't go for parries unless you're 100% certain, because Raiders love to feint the zone attack when you're out of stamina and open you up for an out of stamina parry punish. We now take a look at For Honor's undisputed WWE champion, who has unfortunately seen better days. A past his prime fighter that can only hang with the rest of the crowd because of one incredibly boring mix-up. His moveset is a lot more bare bones and basic compared to the flashy moves we see nowadays. Light heavy or heavy light, he's got the simplest combo chains, but hey, they get the job done. Interesting to note is that Warlord's side heavies are slower and deal more damage than the top heavy, whereas most heroes it's the opposite. Warlord also has a headbutt rivaling that of a Samoan's. You can perform this headbutt by dashing forward and hitting the guard break button, and if it lands, you are guaranteed a free light attack. The closest Warlord gets to flying from the top rope is his dashing heavy attack, or sprinting heavy attack, which can be followed up by a headbutt even if it misses. His old man strength does kick in though, as he does get hyper armor in the later parts of his heavy attacks, including that leaping heavy. A nice and often overlooked feature that Warlord has though is his superior block on light attack. Basically, if you match your opponent's guard and time the attack just right with the opponent's incoming attack, you will block through it and deal bonus damage. Note that this does not work on unblockable attacks, it's only on basic attacks like Warden's Crush and Counter-Strike. I find it to be a good alternative to parries on normal attacks because you're able to start chains, and often it's fast enough to beat feints into guard breaks or other attacks. Not every time, but often. Like Conqueror, Warlord also has an all guard or all block, whatever you want to call it. However, it isn't as useful as Conqueror's in my opinion, as you can't soft fade into it. Out of an all block, you can throw a heavy that will always come from your opponent's left, hitting the opponent's right guard, and track dodges. But if you block a hit while in all guard, you can throw a light attack that always comes out of your right guard, or headbutt into a guaranteed light attack. Note that if after blocking you throw a light attack, it can be blocked if their attack hit your right guard, and the same with your heavy if it hit the left guard. Keep in mind that you do drain stamina during this, and that you cannot counter guard break. What Warlord is really known for though in a lot of assault videos on YouTube is his ability to go coast to coast off of any guard break and whip his opponents around the map like a sack of potatoes. Because of these heelish tactics, it is how he got the nicknames of Ledgelord or Salt Lord. Warlord's zone attack comes out from your left side, the opponent's right, and is pretty good at catching dodging opponents at the cost of more stamina than a regular attack. Warlord also has a sprinting guard break which can carry opponents into walls for a wall splat. However, because it comes out pretty quickly after starting the sprint, it makes for a good mix-up. This is that super boring strat that I mentioned earlier. You can unlock from the fight and sprint into the opponent with the mix-up being, will you crash into them with your shield, or will you guard break, catching their dodge to avoid it? Such mind games. Very fun. To start off engagements, Warlord has that charging shield crash that I just mentioned, or his leaping heavy. Now, how much punishment can Warlord dish out? Off of a heavy parry, Warlord gets a top light, or you can do a zone for more damage but more stamina cost. You also have the option of hitting guard break to bash the opponent with the shield and follow up with a weaker light attack. Really, it's only useful for putting opponents out of stamina if they're almost out, or keeping them out of stamina. And even then, why would you use that after an out of stamina parry? Instead of heavy parries though, I'd recommend going for that superior block on light attack because it does more damage and starts combo chains. Light parries give Warlord a side heavy. Guard breaks give Warlord a top heavy, and wall splats will give Warlord a side heavy if your guard is already to the side. If they're further away, because with Warlord's throws you can actually throw them pretty far after charging with them, you do get that dash heavy into headbutt light attack. As for Warlord's max out of stamina punishes, throwing an out of stamina opponent anywhere gives you the ability to dash heavy into headbutt light, but throwing them into a wall gives you the top light into side heavy. Parrying an out of stamina opponent gives you a side light into top heavy. However, if you parry them against a wall, you will get a top light into side heavy. Now, without a doubt though, what makes Warlord a strong player in 4s is his large health pool and ability to toss opponents around, again, like a sack of potatoes. Warlord is useful in crowds as he can easily isolate an opponent or remove them from the equation entirely. The hyper armor does help as well, but with a lack of moves and mix-ups, it does make him a bit predictable, and if we're brutally honest, one parry can be detrimental when getting ganked. He does have lots of feats that do have him revive faster, or even revive himself after getting killed, as long as it wasn't an execution. To be brutally honest, the only reason people consider Warlord to be S tier in duels is because of that charging bash / guard break mix-up. It is Warlord's strongest mind game, so learning how to properly read, or ensuring that you have enough stamina to roll away, will negate that. However, if you're good at predicting it, and you have fast enough light attacks, you may often be able to interrupt that mix-up entirely. Now, I'd strongly recommend facing a Warlord as far away from any environmental hazards, including walls, as possible. However, you can be a whole country away from a ledge, and a Warlord will still find a way to use his macho arms and slingshot you there. So you know what, just expect it, and don't lose your mind if it happens. We now take a look at the deranged, murderous psychopaths that bear the title of Berserker. They wield 2 axes and have zero qualms about whether they live or die on the battlefield. They're aggressive, relentless, and make short work of any and all who oppose them. Berserkers are classified as assassins purely because they have a reflex guard and dodging attacks, but I don't blame you for mistaking them for a heavy with all the hyper armor they get. They've got an infinite light heavy chain that gets hyper armor after the first attack, and it lasts as long as you don't throw a top heavy or back-to-back-to-back heavies. If you do either of those, the final heavy ends the chain and becomes unblockable. You can also feint any heavy, including one of those finishers, into any light attack that not only comes out at a ludicrous 400 milliseconds and begins chains, but it also has hyper armor because fuck you, that's why. The first heavy in a chain can also be soft feinted with a dodge in the startup. Overwhelming the opponent is a Berserker's specialty, and even has a Beyblade spinning zone attack that comes out of your right guard hitting the opponent's left and confirms all the attacks if the first one lands. It can be followed up with a hyper armor light to start a chain. Berserkers also have dash and dodge light attacks like I mentioned earlier that can also start chains. There is even a dash forward heavy that has hyper armor. One of the best abilities on top of an already stacked moveset is a guaranteed guard break off deflect, as long as the opponent doesn't have hyper armor. Berserkers can start off a fight with any of the dodge / dash attacks, although I don't recommend any of the lights, or a dashing heavy that comes out of your right guard. As for punishes, heavy parries give Berserker a light attack with hyper armor to start a chain, or a delayed zone attack for more damage and stamina cost if the opponent isn't blocking to your right or their left. Note that in this case I still recommend the deflect into guard break. On a light parry, Berserker gets a top heavy, but if I'm honest, the side heavies are better because they allow you to chain into more attacks, unlike a top heavy. So guard breaks give Berserker a side heavy, and wall splats guarantee up to a top heavy, but again, you might opt to go for the side heavies to begin a chain. As for out of stamina punishes, a forward throw, back throw, or parry will all give you back-to-back side heavies. You can do a side heavy into top heavy, but it does leave you open to a guard break on stand up if the opponent isn't out of stamina anymore, or if you were in revenge. An absolute monster truck in groups, Berserker's only downfall is a reflex guard and an assassin-sized health pool. But if you get your hyper armor rolling, it lets you trade with and switch opponents while getting ganked without interrupting your flow. And the combination of some feats like Sharpened Blade and Fear itself is stupid powerful. Odin himself is fearful of this power. Now I know I've built up Zerk as this unstoppable killing machine, but they're not as invincible as I've made them out to be. A Berserker that uses the dash/dodge lights frequently is a fool. Not to mention, at least until the unblockable, they can easily be shut down by just blocking. Although the heavy feint into 400 millisecond light is kinda hard to catch. The unblockable will force a reaction, but their only opener is really just fast-paced attacks. Good Berserkers will try to maintain the offense and keep the pressure on you, so keep your cool and don't let yourself get overwhelmed, and you can try to shut them down. Most Berserkers I've played against follow a specific pattern. It isn't until much higher levels of play that you find players as unhinged as the character they play. Be mindful of the zone attack, as most use it as a finisher, and if you block it, you can parry it. We now go to a character that has had a relationship with the fan base, kinda like Conqueror had. Once, we all joked that there were 13 mythical Valkyrie mains that were so hard to find, and if you made a wish upon seeing one, it would come true. There was probably only 13 of them because you had to be a masochist to be playing one of the worst characters in the game at the time. Now, at least on console, it ain't hard to find a Valkyrie, and it ain't hard to see why. Much like her God of War counterparts, Valkyrie can kill you with a large variety of different moves. Her lights are now much faster than before, and she's got every variation of a 3-move combo. So, mix up lights and heavies however the hell you want. If you end the chain with either side light attack, it will actually daze the opponent as it's going to be a shield bash, as well as send them flying with the potential for a wall splat. However, you also have the option if you get to the last move in her chain to hit guard break to sweep the opponent off their feet. And you can follow this up immediately with a heavy for a full punish. You can also achieve this sweep by guard breaking, throwing and hitting guard break again, but keep in mind the shield sweep is dodgeable. On top of that, her lights also have a superior block property on startup, kind of like Warlords earlier, meaning if you time it right, you'll punch through your opponent's normal attack and deal bonus damage while starting a chain. Another frustrating move for opponents is her soft feint into shield crush. During the startup of any heavy, hitting guard break will smash your shield into the opponent. Just like Conquerors, this does guarantee a light attack. Now this cancel also extends to her zone attack. Coming out of your right guard, and then the left after that, it is a 2-hit zone attack where you can either hard feint the second attack or cancel it into a shield crush by hitting guard break. Now if you already thought that she was plenty versatile, we ain't even done yet. Because Valkyrie is a hybrid between two character classes, she gets traits that both assassins and heavies have. Like assassins, she has dodging and dashing lights, as well as a deflect into bleeding heavy. These all act as chain starters too, letting her go from defense to offense immediately. And she also technically has an all block. Dodging back and holding guard break will let you retreat into an all block stance. You can let it fly and hit the opponent with your shield, dazing them and guaranteeing a light attack, or you can cancel it, but it's more often used to avoid mix-ups that most other heroes have to roll away from, like Highlander's kick into caber toss mix-up that we'll get to shortly. Starting fights, Valkyrie does have their dashing heavy attack that comes out of your right guard, or you can use one of the dodge/dash. As for her punishes, heavy parries give Valkyrie a dashing light attack. However, again, keep in mind that Valkyrie does have a deflect heavy that will do bleed damage. Light parries give Valkyrie any heavy. Guard breaks and wall splats will give Valkyrie any heavy. As for out of stamina punishes, off of a parry or a throw to the right, you can go heavy, light, into sweep, into heavy attack finisher. However, for a more mix-up based punish, you can go right throw or parry into 3 back-to-back heavies. You can either let that third heavy fly, cancel it and guard break to catch a dodge, or soft feint it into the shield crush and continue your combo. In 4v4s, Valkyrie's fast light attacks make her effective at interrupting attacks when ganking, and her dodge back guard break into all guard makes for good retreats if the opponent activates Revenge or uses feats like Kensei's Unblockable or Smoke Bombs. Keep in mind, however, her sweep is a double-edged sword, as it can hit multiple heroes, but that includes allies, so be careful. She's got pretty decent feats as well. One that I particularly enjoy is Sharpened Blade, because right now it is stupidly powerful, and with fast light attacks, you will be feared. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Valkyries are much more versatile now than they ever have been. With good offense and defense, you have to play smart and read carefully. If you're facing just a light spamming Valkyrie, do what you can to get some distance and try to force a dashing or dodging light because, hey, like I said earlier, that's easy parry bait. If not, remember that blocking interrupts light chains and they're gonna run out of stamina eventually. Be mindful of her shield mix-up on heavies and instinctively hit dodge as soon as you see that orange unblockable flash. Keep in mind, after that shield crush, she can still follow up with another attack, so I wouldn't go for a guard break, I would try to go for a fast light. However, her sweep is easy to dodge, and as soon as you see the orange flash, if you dodge, you do get a confirmed guard break, allowing for one of your punishes. I'd also strongly recommend getting good at feinting to prepare for any defensive Valkyries, such as ones that like using the light superior block, or those dodge attacks. We're now going to take a look at everyone's favorite Scotsman next to the one from Samurai Jack. Highlander is a beast, there is no sugarcoating it. He's got solid offense, and honestly surprising defense in the right hands as well. Let's elaborate. Highlander has two stances, offensive and defensive. For now, we're just going to start with defensive as it is the default stance. In defensive stance, all of Highlander's light attacks have a crushing property, just like Warden's top light, except now Highlander can counter any normal attack from any direction. Highlander's heavies are slow, but they do have hyper armor. Inspired by a Berserker, Highlander also has a spin to win attack with hyper armor. By dashing forward and hitting heavy, you can launch a top-down attack, or before it's thrown, you can soft feint into either side heavy and spin like a top. You can also throw out your zone attack from defensive stance. It comes out of your right guard hitting the opponent up to 3 times, but you can feint any attack after the first one. Now, as for Highlander's offensive stance, you can enter it by holding the heavy attack button, or after landing any attack holding the heavy attack button. That means any attack that doesn't end a chain can be followed up directly into offensive stance, including the spin to win. On the note of that spin to win, you can actually soft feint the dash forward heavy into offensive stance by just holding heavy when dashing forward. Instead of going to that top-down attack, you'll just make it look like it and then just enter offensive stance. What makes offensive stance so good is that all heavies become unblockable. You still have light attacks though, don't worry, and they come out pretty quickly. You do lose the ability to block, but your dodges now have quicker recovery. You can kick an opponent by hitting guard break, or move back and hit guard break to grab an opponent and send them to the floor behind you, and that does track a dodge pretty well. Either of these guarantee an offensive stance heavy. The kick also wall splats, and both moves will ledge if there is a ledge in front of you for a kick or behind you for that grab. However, most Highlanders abuse the kick soft feint into grab by tapping guard break for the kick and then moving back and guard break to transfer it into the grab. It is much harder to dodge as an early reaction to the kick gets caught by the grab, and you can hold off on double tapping guard break in case they don't dodge. To open fights, Highlander can use a sprinting heavy that comes out of your right, then left guard with the second attack being feintable, or one of those forward dash heavy mix-up attacks. Personally, I prefer the forward dash heavy mix-up because you can go straight into offensive stance, and of course you get hyper armor. As for Highlander's max punishes, a heavy parry guarantees a light attack, but keep in mind, Highlander's defensive stance light attacks, if timed right, give you much more damage. Light parries guarantee Highlander an offensive stance heavy if you don't switch stances. As soon as you parry, hold the heavy attack and let it fly. Guard breaks give Highlander the option of light attack or zone and cancel for much more damage, but much more of a stamina cost. Wall splats give a defensive stance top heavy. Highlander's out of stamina punishes are pretty good too. If you throw an opponent, you get a defensive stance heavy. If you throw them into a wall or parry an out of stamina opponent, you can get light into heavy. Now, if I'm honest, it doesn't take much to be successful in 4s with a Highlander at low levels. The unblockables put much more pressure on an opponent when getting ganked to parry, and the kick or grab make great melee attacks that will leave them open to more attacks from your teammates. When getting ganked, I find that Highlander's wider attacks and hyper armor really help. However, these attacks are a lot slower and easier to parry, so feinting them and following up with attacks is the best way to utilize that hyper armor and still get through attacks. Highlander also has a Spear Storm, I believe it's called, which is similar to the Samurai's Arrow Storm. It's freaking good. Now, inexperienced Highlanders are easy to find because they'll try to open up every fight with the spin to win and go directly into offensive stance to use kick into grab, because those are the only two moves they know. Those Highlanders are pretty easy to pick off, honestly. Assuming you don't parry that first attack, expect a kick into grab if I'm honest. Or really, roll away if you're unsure. At the moment, rolling away is the easiest way to counter the kick into grab because the dodge window is narrow and very, very oddly shaped. If you manage to get away and they enter offensive stance again, remember they can't block while in offensive stance. And the attacks there don't have hyper armor, so faster attacks like Kensei or Peacekeeper zones will be a thorn in their side. If all they rely on is that kick into grab, do what you can to keep them out of offensive stance. However, good Highlanders will be able to flow between offensive and defensive stance with ease, and probably feint a lot of their heavies to bait parries for a defensive crushing counter. Good Highlanders are tough to beat, but if you have patience and are able to read the opponent, know when they can or can't feint, then you have a shot. It really comes down to character knowledge and outplaying your opponent at that part. This advice is also helpful when facing the demon from hell herself, Shaman. Reddit and many YouTube comments will have you believe Shaman is overpowered or broken, and I'm sure I'm gonna get flamed in the comment section for even suggesting that she isn't, but suck it, nerds. Like Centurion, she's a noob stomper, but she just also happens to be more viable at higher levels of play, unlike Centurion.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Let's start at the beginning though. Shaman gets double confirmed lights off of any direction, you just have to press light attack again after the first one hits. Any heavy can be soft feinted into a guard break or a light attack bleed stab in any direction. Or you can follow up the last heavy in any chain fray bleed stab. Unlike Peacekeepers, however, this one isn't guaranteed. If thrown out of the left guard, the final heavy in a chain becomes super slow and unblockable. It can only be soft feinted into a guard break though, not a bleed stab. As an assassin, Shaman also has a reflex guard as well as dash and dodge heavies. However, the dash heavy is interesting as you can dash forward or backward and hold heavy to assume a pouncing stance. From there, you can change the direction of the attack in any which way you like, that is either left, right, or up. If successful, the attack does start a chain. This also works with a bash. By dashing forward or back and holding guard break, you assume a similar stance and can launch a flying headbutt into your opponent. This deals stamina damage, will wall splat, and can be followed up with a zone attack. You can actually switch back and forth between the two by hitting the opposite button mid-charge. For example, you can assume a bash position, let go of guard break and hit heavy, Shaman will stutter, then the heavy attack will come out. Now I know I built this up as something crazy, but in fact it is really easy to dodge or parry. If anything, it just looks funny. Shaman's zone attack kind of works like Berserker's, a spinning string of attacks coming out of your left guard. It confirms the first two hits unless the first one is blocked. The last two are classified as lights, so be careful. You can soft feint into a bleed stab after the first two hits, or cancel the zone altogether. Now, I've mentioned that light bleed stab quite a bit. Now, in case you haven't fought a Shaman before, here's why it is so important. When the opponent is bleeding, Shaman's true potential is unlocked, as any successful attacks now heal you, and your guard break bash changes. Rather than headbutting the poor opponent, you'll just take a bite out of their neck instead, healing you. This pounce is guaranteed off of any guard break throw, by the way. While the opponent is bleeding, if you miss the first pounce, you can hit guard break immediately again to pounce again, assuming you have the stamina. Shaman's got some good punishes as well. Parrying a heavy lets Shaman get a double light, however, you can go into the zone attack to begin your mix-ups. Alternatively though, you can deflect and hit light attack to bleed your opponent as well. A light parry will give Shaman a heavy, or a heavy cancel into bleed. Shaman gets a heavy on a guard break, or a guaranteed bleed if you're in the top stance. If you throw the opponent, you can hit heavy for a free follow-up attack, or guard break for a pounce which will give you free lunch if they happen to be bleeding. Wall splats give that same dashing attack, so there's no real benefit other than the extra stamina damage. As for when your opponent's out of stamina, any throw gets the follow-up heavy into left unblockable heavy, or you can follow up that first heavy with a top or right heavy and a bleed stab after that. If they're bleeding and you're in need of healing, do the pounce instead. Parries give back-to-back heavies. No follow-up bleed is guaranteed after those. Alternatively, if they're bleeding, just dash forward and pounce. Now, it's not hard to go around with 4s without seeing a Shaman, and really, it's not hard to see why. Her newfound powers after smelling blood synergizes well with Nobushi, Peacekeeper, Shinobi, Valkyrie, and any other hero that has feats that make attacks deal bleed damage. When ganking, Shaman's bash and bleed abilities make short work of opponents. Her reflex guard may hurt when she's getting ganked, however her fast light attacks can work to interrupt many other attacks. Now I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but understanding a hero, what they can and can't do, is the key to success. With Shaman, it seems like there isn't much she can't do, but let's take a closer look. Shaman's zone attack, like Berserker's, often comes when the opponent faints or when you're almost out of health, almost like a finishing move, making it pretty predictable to see when it's gonna be coming. Her heavies aren't the fastest, and if you aren't parry trigger happy, the dagger cancel can at least be blocked. Most often I see that dagger cancel come out to the top, as that is what I believe is the fastest. If you happen to start bleeding, don't overreact, and don't dodge on every single movement because that's an easy way to get eaten. If you do start bleeding, try to keep a distance and dodge the bite when you see it coming. You can get a guard break if you throw it quick enough, and if you're close enough. Otherwise, let them waste the stamina and try to pounce again, and just dodge it again. On that note, just try to avoid getting guard broken when you're bleeding at all costs. Be wary of those heavy soft feints, and just try to be as unpredictable as a Shaman herself. And that about wraps it up. Thanks for watching, and thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially my top tier supporters Trung, Bubbles PL, and Powell Weissman. If you want to support the channel with more than just a subscription here on YouTube, feel free to check out my Patreon via the link in the description below. You'll also find a link to my merch shop so you can get your Marco, Yolo, and Deus Volt swag. I've also got a Discord to join and plenty of the social medias to follow. You can find links in the description. Samurai video is coming next week, followed by some new stuff, so make sure you're subscribed so you're the first to see it. Thanks for watching again, and I will see you next time.